culturally, women don't think of themselves as founders. Most women prefer to bootstrap companies. Many of them prefer to do nonprofits. And even when we were creating FemPeak, we were struggling with getting men invest in it. And when they did invest, they wrote small checks and they treated it as if they were giving money to a nonprofit. And I was like, look, we may pivot, but you're investing in me.
Managing money is something that anyone can learn, man or woman. If I look around, there's no shortage of finding ambitious women to invest in, We have an apprentice program with 74 young women in it. They're either in college or they're working at a company like Tesla, or they're on Wall Street working 6 days a week, 14 hours a day. I mean, it's incredible what they're doing. And you would never doubt their ambition and skills.
Hello, I'm Somi Arian. I'm a tech philosopher and the founder of Impeak. My guest on today's podcast is Rajiv Kapoor from Chai Ventures, a female-focused venture firm in New York City. I have a lot to say about Rajiv. I feel so fortunate that through this platform, I get to meet some incredible people like him who are working tirelessly to change the narrative of venture capital to include more women. But instead of me telling you, I think it's best if I let you hear this conversation for yourself. It's a topic that's very close to my heart. As many of you might know that before we had Impeak, we were FemPeak. This is a conversation you don't want to miss. All right, Rajiv, thank you so much for being here. Why don't you tell me a quick overview of who you are? So we got introduced through a family office in New York. I met with you. It was a great conversation. I was really inspired with what you're doing. You have a big focus on women entrepreneurs, but why don't you give a quick overview of who you are, what your background is, and then we'll take it from there.
Amazing. Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. It was great to meet you in New York, and I appreciate you having me on this podcast. And so, yeah, a little bit about me. I guess I've been into entrepreneurship from the beginning. I got the bug from my dad. He was an entrepreneur. So a lot of, startup work over the years, for the most part. Went public with a company called Marketo in 2013. And then after that, I was investing in high growth public companies. And I think that's where my evolution started. I was just like, I feel more comfortable on the investor side. And then that led to angel investing. And after that, the creation of our first fund. So where we are now, just to kind of give you that, we are working on a launch of a fund 2. We're an early stage pre-seed and seed fund. And like you said, we're creating a new model for investing in women. And I can explain more about that. But
yes, please. Yeah, please tell me. So you said that you're coming up with a new model. What do you mean by that exactly? Is investing in women different?
I would say, well, let me tell you a little story about the beginning of it. So initially I was making those angel investments, and then in 2019 made a first women founded investment. And then something clicked and I said, we need to focus on this. And I think it had to do with like my proximity. My team is calling it proximity to women, because I have, my wife and 3 daughters, and just like been, I guess, had the gift of some kind of understanding from that. And then once we decided to invest in the best women founders we could find, the first investment I made, by the way, was like in property tech. So because I sort of had a little background in my family in real estate, so I think kind of explains how it led to that. But then made this woman founder investment and said, oh my gosh, if we want to focus on this, we need to think about what industries are we in, because they're not necessarily in the industries that I'm looking at right now. And what stages. When we decided to go earlier stage and get right to the beginning when other investors may not be there. And then we opened up. So as I said, we opened up industries to new industries. That's sort of, and eventually we evolved into our current thesis, which is wellness, human connection, and health. And because I just think we were finding extraordinary women founders and opportunities, in those industries. And then geographically as well. So we ended up with a portfolio that's West Coast US, for the most part, West Coast, East Coast, and then London, because I happen to have a European wife, and we were just going to Europe a lot. And I found these incredible women in London. Again, it was pretty like ground up at that time, just like following the threads of incredible introductions and people I'm finding. But I was trying to share these examples of how, like, to just find the best women, we had to change so much and not just keep doing what we were doing.
Okay. So you said that you made your first investment in a woman in 2019. How long before that had you started doing these investments? That was your first angel, right?
Yeah, and then that's it. We from that point on, we were deploying approximately 85% of capital to women-founded companies.
But before
And
that, like, how long did it take you? How many other had you done before that?
I had done probably about 10 investments in guys before I got to that point. So starting in the end of 2017, all through 2018, and then realizing this in 2019.
So what was it that clicked for you? You said something clicked when you did that investment. But firstly, tell me about the story of that one particular investment that you did in the woman founder. I have so many questions around that, actually. So tell me, like, what was the reason for not investing in women before? Was it because it just didn't come about? It didn't come to your attention? You didn't meet as many women founders? And then what was the thing that you said it clicked? What was the difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think I wasn't filtering for that initially. So and probably that's how most of the VCs are right now. They're just getting deal flow, and the way they get deal flow, and it's mostly going to be guys that are coming through. And so I think that was just the natural, just like watching the natural flow. That's what I was seeing. But once I made that investment, I realized, I think part of it too is I like strong people around me. I'm used to, it's hard to pinpoint things, but like strong mom, which led to even my sister, for example. You could see it on her. She was a firefighter, which is pretty unusual.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, she was like 1, 2, or 3 out of 1,000 firefighters in our area that were women. So I think that was part of it as well, and just realizing and being open and listening to the opportunities that maybe others weren't looking for. But then after that, it became more active. It was like, okay, I went to a dinner, I went to an investment dinner. I started getting invited to these, industry dinners, things like that. So I go to this dinner, and it's like 10 guys, supposed to be 2 women. One of them wasn't feeling well, didn't make it. So like 10 guys, 1 woman. And I was like, well, as a woman-focused investor, it's not really effective. so then I had to change up like what I'm even attending and who I'm talking to.
That's interesting. So is it true? I mean, I've been told this many times. First of all, I was telling you earlier that sometimes I get asked if I have a male co-founder, which reminds me of like in the old times where you needed a man to have like a bank account or something. So I suppose people still have that mentality to some degree. But the question I had was, a lot of people say women are less ambitious or less risk-taking. What has been your observation in that sense? Is there any level of truth to that?
I mean, it's kind of a generalization, but at the same time, I do think probably if you looked at the statistics on it, like I'll tell you a story. There's one founder I have in our portfolio. Her name's Amy Williams. She's based out of London. Her company is called Good Loop. When I met her, she was on stage, thought leader, talking about data, how to protect data, and her company converts advertising dollars into donations. So it's a really cool model that has generated millions of donations so far, just in the early stages. And we had a meeting in New York a couple of years ago, and I was like, you can step on the gas more. And she was like, Yeah, I know, but like I need to make sure that I have like X amount of runway and like protect the business and this and that. And I was like, wow. And she's, I don't ask founder's age, but she was pretty young. So I was like, that's pretty astute to be thinking about all that. Um, and so I do think there probably, are more women that think that way. And like because of that, they do have safer businesses in a way and gives them higher chance of success.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, when I think about our business, the way that I've stretched, we went through three different pivots because at first we started, this was actually not called InPeak, it was called FemPeak. And we were focusing more on bringing more women into business and technology. We realized that was too small. We couldn't get enough women interested in building businesses. So it wasn't enough for me to like make a SaaS, kind of type of business, right? So then we pivoted to Web3 when Web3 was like at the peak. Everybody was excited about it. It's like, oh yeah, this is the next big thing, and we're gonna make a Web3 LinkedIn, because I've always wanted to build a social network of some sort. And that was very promising at first, but then we had to pivot again because Web3 went down and FTX happened, all that stuff, right? So, oh my God, if you look at how we stretched our runway, like this little kind of runway that we got from the beginning, and we're still going, and it's like now we've built a whole new business model. We've just started monetizing this new one, and we are actually not far from breaking even. Honestly, I think that most people would have given up and they would have run out of money. So although of course I'm quite lucky that I have another successful business and we have been able to, I don't run that one myself, so I work 100% on InPeak, but I built that one in a way that it runs without me. So to be honest, I could easily retire if it was like a matter of not not being ambitious. I could easily retire on my other business. It generates enough money that pays for my life. I can go on holidays. I can have a nice life and buy designer handbags. Like I could do that, right? But instead, I decided to build this one. And we're keeping going. And I do think that, I don't know if it's about being woman or whether it's about being an immigrant, because as an immigrant, there's also that aspect of it, that there's that
Yeah.
extra added pressure of making sure that you make it in this new kind of environment that you are in, right? So being a first generation immigrant, so you're like, you're on your own. So I wouldn't say women are not ambitious. I think that they're, like you said, I think they're really good from my experience of the kind of women I see. They're really good at making things go further and and like being very careful with money, because maybe something to do with biologically the way that they have and maybe culturally the way that um, they have been brought up. So this concept of women not being good with money, you don't agree with that?
Listen, I think regarding money, being good with money or the ambition and all of that, there's no reason why a woman shouldn't be just as good as a man. I think there are cultural differences. There are, differences that people encounter. So it could happen, for example, it could happen that a woman maybe because of cultural biases and differences takes a little longer to figure out, what she's thinking. But like there's no reason why it should be different. So I don't subscribe to that at all. And managing money is something that anyone can learn, man or woman, you know. So the thing is what I'm seeing is just if I look around, I just happen to be seeing really ambitious women, whether it's like women founders we've invested in 59 companies in fund one. There's no shortage of finding ambitious women to invest in, and then on the other side, a big part of our community is women venture capitalists. So I want to mention this because this is a key part of our DNA. We call it like emerging check writers, right? So there are women working their way up at different funds, and the decisions are made by the partners at the top. And so a lot of times, because of inertia or just the way things have been for so long, it's usually I think the stat is 85% of partners are men in venture capital, but also I think that might understate, because there could be partners that don't deploy as much money as others. So, you know, it could be even less than 15, the women portion. And I think what we realize is like, so there are ambitious women that want to, do well at a fund and rise up and become a partner, and on the other side, and then there are young women in college who are interested in this stuff. There, some of them, we have an apprentice program with 74 young women in it that are in college or just out of college, and I see them. They're oftentimes, they're either in college or they're working at a company like Tesla, or they're on Wall Street working 6 days a week, 14 hours a day. I mean, it's incredible what they're doing, and you would never doubt their ambition, and skills. You would never doubt their skills either. And so I think, like, one interesting story I want to tell you is, like, there's a woman in our, more on the venture capital side. She was in our program where, so what we do is we have peer support. So we just like bring different, women venture capitalists together. They could be in different cities, different funds, could be London, New York, and they wouldn't otherwise really know each other. And then we create a safe space. Like, for us, this is a really important part of our business. Like, whichever direction we're looking, it's safe space. And so this one woman got promoted to partner, and she's at a multi-$100 million fund that invests in climate. And then she told me that her husband is also an entrepreneur. They have a little boy. And then she's like, I almost downgraded my career because of this, because of the demands on the household, and I barely made it. And I was like, oh my God, that's, to me, a perfect example of how, like, a small thing can, derail someone. And I think women are facing that. Like, there's a lot of small things, even if they want it, or they have the talent. And that's what we have to be careful of, as, like, the others around them, their managers, or, the investors. And there's could be their partner, because, like, what happened in that story is her partner said, no, you're doing this. She got that support from her spouse, and she did it.
That's such a great story. I had actually made a note to talk about children, because that's a really big part of this, because often people forget that women are the ones that actually are bearing the child.
Yeah.
So I decided not to have children, and the story of childless women is a whole other, and that's even that term, right? Like, people refer to you as childless, like, like there's something wrong with you, like, like it's like hairless, or like something. It's like, but I laugh at it. It's fine. It is what it is. But the decision that often people have to make, like in my case, I highly agree with you with what you said about it can take longer for women. I definitely agree with that, because if you're a woman, it takes longer. If you're an immigrant, it takes even longer. In my case, I had to wait for about 11 years to get a British citizenship before I could even start a business. So I came here when I was 23. Then I had to wait for another 11 years. Then I built my first business, learned about entrepreneurship, building business, money management. Then I was like, okay, now I'm ready to do a tech platform and go and raise money and, like, build something bigger. Because, as you know, there's a big difference between bootstrapping and building something that's venture based. So all of those things, it takes a lot longer, because women don't have the right networks, they don't have the right education. You talked about learning, and initially when we were building FemPeak instead of InPeak, we were thinking that we were going to bring that network and learning to women. But we found it very hard, because when a network is called a women network, the type of people that you get in it, they are often people that don't have as much power and money. It becomes a very insular kind of network, where you don't really have enough people who are writing checks, who are actually making an impact. That's why we pivoted from FemPeak to InPeak, and we were like, let's make it inclusive. And that actually upset some of our investors. Specifically, one of our investors got really upset. He was like, I don't like that you're changing the mission, you're losing sight of your. And I disagree with that, because I feel like I can make a lot more impact if I have a broader network and I'm building something that's for everybody, but as I'm doing that, I can really look out for women, right? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that idea.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think there was a founder once I was meeting with, and I was talking about having a dinner. Like, we'll have dinners that are like women only founders or VCs pretty often. And then she's like, I collaborate with men all the time, and I'm like, that's good. So I think the thing is, like, thinking about like our fund and like it being women first, or we kind of think about each part of the business and like what's the role of men, instead of like just saying this is all women, right? So in terms of deploying capital into founders, yes, it's going to be mostly or all into women founded teams. Yeah, there could be a guy co-founder, by the way, on that team. And I think the role of men as allies, I think about that a lot, sponsors, allies. So I think it's a mix, right? So I think sometimes it's good to have a women only group or a women friendly space, and then the next day the woman turns around and has to reach out beyond, right? So they can take that safe space, get some help, figure things out, make themselves stronger, and then they do need to go out and interact with the rest of the world. It still is a fact that most LP money, as I mentioned before, most of the checks are being written by men. So then you go out and engage with them as well, right? And by the way, I think there are men who are more supportive. So finding, what I tend to find is that in our community, because we have this incredible community, right, where we have dinners, events, gatherings in different cities, and it's really focused on these incredible women. But then when they invite someone, that's probably a supporter. So kind of being open to that, right? They know who to invite. They know who's really there for them.
Yeah, that's really cool. So tell me a little bit more about the children thing. I really want to unpack that a little bit. Have you seen cases where having children will have impacted a founder, maybe in a positively, negatively? But talk a little bit about from where you stand. What are you observing about the impact?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought about this over the years, and I feel that it's kind of something that it's really the founder's business, if that makes sense. Like, so it's not something we as investors should really be factoring into our decisions. So I've seen founders bring their baby to work. I'm sure there are challenges, but I'm sure guys have challenges and women have challenges, and there's lots of challenges to deal with. So I just believe that women and also their spouses and their families. I mean, I do believe in, like, Reshma Sajani is out there advocating for moms. If you look at her, she's well known for Girls Who Code. So I agree that should be advocated for, and there's probably massive policy changes that need to be changed. But then for my angle of where I stand, I mean, there's a story where one friend of mine was asking about a woman founder and saying, "Hey, she's not very responsive right now. Do you know why that might be?" And I knew she had a baby recently. And then I thought about it really hard, and I was like, what do I say to this question? And my answer was, no, I don't know any reason, because that wouldn't be a reason. She's a good founder and she'll solve it however. And so I'm not going to, judge that.
Yeah, absolutely. It does make sense to me. How many more investors, VCs, do you know similar to yourself that are on this mission and are investing primarily on women who are men?
Yeah, it's interesting because in the ecosystem, obviously there are other women-focused funds. I think compared to the women-focused funds, like, there are definitely other funds that deploy into women founders. I think our DNA of working with women at other funds is unique. I think that's the unique part of our DNA. So I feel like that makes us a little different compared to the other women-focused funds. But also, by the way, we get along really well with other funds that are kind of focused on underrepresented of other kinds. We tend to be, mission aligned, values aligned, help each other. So we can definitely help each other and do deals together as well. But I kind of want to point out that, when I went and checked, some of the funds that are pretty well known are still under 100 million in the women focused area. And so my question is, I met a top fund maybe recently, and they were deploying 20 billion a year, and so I feel like there's a gap on the in terms of scale. Like, how many billion-dollar funds are women first or women friendly? And I think that's what will change. It will change. There will be women focused funds that get big with the right model, and there'll be other funds that adjust to the new world and like equalize it more, because just looking again at the industry data, a lot of those large funds are deploying something along the lines of I'd say 90% or more of their capital to teams that do not have a woman founder. So they're going to have to adjust.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about realistically how many women are actually applying. There is something to say that investors are not investing in women founders. There's another thing is that from my observation, I may be wrong, but I don't see a high number of women applying. So we have a survey. We have 3,500 startups on our platform so far, and we've done a survey. So far, over 800 people have filled out the survey. And we didn't ask the question of what gender they were. Maybe we should have. But from looking at the names, I don't see that many women founders. I see a very small number of women founders applying, like even like filling out the survey. So I think this goes back to, and this was one of the problems that we were trying to solve with FemPeak, which we found it was very difficult, was that culturally, women don't think of themselves as founders as much. And the culture of entrepreneurship, here's what I've observed. This might be a generalization, but I've been working on this for several years now, and this is what I've seen. Most women prefer to start to bootstrap companies. Many of them prefer to do nonprofits. And even when we were creating FemPeak, we were struggling with getting men invest in it. And when they did invest, they wrote small checks and they treated it as if they were giving money to a nonprofit, even though we were like, like we are going to make this a big platform. And I was like, look, we may pivot, many things may happen, but you're investing in me. And you know that I'm going to make this a company that will be profitable and it will be super successful. So do you want to invest in me? Because if you're investing in the product, then the product could change, right? But we found that like a lot of people who were writing us checks were saying that like I have daughters, and I want to support, and they would write me a 10K check. Like I have so many 10K people on my cap table. I have a few 300Ks, like 200, like one 300K, a few 100Ks. But primarily people were writing me 10K checks. And at the time we needed the money. We were just starting out. And they would just say, okay, I have daughters, I want to support. And as if like they are giving money to a charity, so it was quite painful. Like I was getting these checks with like a little bit of a grudge, and while I was also thankful, I was like, well, I really appreciate the support, but like I wish you would just look at us as actual tech startup. That's what we were building. We were building a a networking platform. The truth is that our platform is a networking platform. It can be used for anything. It can be used for women. It can be used for Web3. It can be used. Now we're building this community of startups and VCs. And actually, other people, it's a SaaS business. Other people can create their own communities on our platform. The problem is that most of the current community networks they're kind of detached. So you would go in and it's like you're white labeling, and then all these communities are living in islands. Whereas, for example, something like Discord comes closer to the idea that we had, where we wanted to do something. But Discord doesn't have like a news feed where you can see all the different communities that you're part of. And when you get into things like Web3, community, the concept of community becomes so big with DAOs and all sorts of NFT communities, etc. It all made sense that this was an opportunity for us to build. The way we saw it was that like the future of LinkedIn, this is going to be based on communities. I think in retrospect, we were super early for that concept. So 100%, I still believe in my core that community is the future of social networking. So we're going to go from social networking to community networking. So we were super early for that, and we had to pivot from that. So then the next step was that at first we thought maybe we do it with women because women understand community, but it worked out. We weren't quite right about that because there weren't enough women that were building things in the tech space we wanted to do for women in business and technology. So we pivoted to Web3. So the point here is that the concept was very ambitious. It was probably too ambitious for the time that it was in, right? But we were still being viewed as this like little network of it's a woman entrepreneur who is also an immigrant, here's a 10K check.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear if you have come across similar kind of stories and how women's ambition sometimes is downplayed in some ways.
I'm sure it happens. So I feel like because of the imbalance on the check writer side, I think it's very difficult to understand, maybe personalities or even entire businesses that are needed. And so I think that is the big challenge for the current industry as it stands right now. And I think like even now, like we're building out our team. We have an associate, Alex, who's been on board for 2 months, and just like having her around, it's actually helpful for me, right? Like she can help me look at businesses and say, this is what it looks like from a woman's perspective. So I kind of encourage funds to make sure they have that perspective, and I think that's one step. But I understand, yeah, because the percentages are so low, it's harder for women. And so I've been talking to, and that's one of the reasons why we also write, sometimes the first check. And I hear you about the 10K check, I understand. I think that whoever is writing those checks, it's a start, they're going to need to evolve to seeing the full potential. So it's a good start, but they need to evolve to seeing the full potential. And so that's I think it's definitely a true issue. And then there's also different kinds of investors. So it's interesting because like if you look at like we do a lot of B2B SaaS, business to business software. And if you look at those investors tend to like if you look at when they're at Series A, for example, which is a little bit further along, they're looking for, that the numbers have changed a little bit over the last like couple of years, but basically they're looking for that X million revenue, let's say a couple million revenue, 400% growth, the product is loved and whatever. So a lot of the B2B SaaS, like by Series A, is like that. It's sort of scientific a little bit. But then there's another kind of investing that's like pre-revenue, might take years to get to the product or the revenue. And then I think it's more theoretical, and I think that could be more of a worry for me for women, because there's no data yet. And so it's like literally what those investors are used to hearing, or who they're used to hanging out with, or whatever, is going to carry the day a lot of times. And I think that's where some of the big problems come in right now, because probably some of the big dollars go that way too. I mean, there have been, in the last few years, there have been companies that went public like that, like something as large as like Virgin Galactic, going public with like pretty much zero revenue.
How do they pull it off? What are they doing differently?
I, I don't know, but I think that, you know, regardless of men or women, when we go meet a bunch of companies, and like the companies that are able to educate on the landscape, like you can obviously see they know the landscape. They're not just talking about their business, but they're talking about all the other competitors and how they're different, and it's so clear. And the ones that are talking about like where they're going, even if it's has to be adjusted, even if it's not exact, those founders, I think it's really, I think those are the ones that can raise money based on that, that
Storytelling.
idea. Yeah, the storytelling and the future idea, rather than like, this is what we have.
So maybe that's a skill that we need to. It's a different kind of storytelling. Yeah, it's basically painting a dream. And
Yeah.
yeah, one other thing I wanted to talk to you about was, this is something that I've observed, and I wonder whether you agree with that. But it sort of upsets me a little bit sometimes that even women who are super rich and powerful and have money, they seem to generally give more money to charity and nonprofits than invest in startups. This is, but think about, for example, somebody like McKinsey Bezos, right? Like the amount of money that she poured into nonprofits, after getting her money from the divorce and everything. And I see that with various foundations by actresses and all that stuff. I think we need to create a new culture of investing. So, I always think, like, I don't have kids. I'm going to build this company to as successful as it can possibly be. And as I do that, I'm not going to leave that money for anybody. When I die, I'm going to, eventually, obviously, I can't take it with me, right? So what I've decided that I'm not going to do a charity foundation or a non-profit foundation. I want instead that to be a fund that invests and then gets the profits back and then invests in more women, right? So basically invest in women, and then from there get the profits, invest in more women, and build a culture around that, right? And put some of that money into the education of women, and kind of helping them build that dream, build that courage, etc. So what's your observation been? Does it ever bother you that, like, some of the money that's going into nonprofit from very rich and powerful women that could be going into investing in women founders?
Yeah. That's so interesting, because there's a lot to that. But in the early years, because we're kind of, us as a fund, we're coming from a place where it was more like individuals investing in our first fund, and then coming into our second fund, it's shifting a bit to more, we're talking to more family offices, institutions. And I think it's a slow shift, but it's happening. And so one of the things we noticed is we really wanted to focus on women investors in the first fund, individuals. And it was very difficult. And one time I had a call with someone, we kind of chatted about it, and they said to me, yeah, we're finding it really difficult to raise money from women investors because, and then this person said to me, because they usually then defer to their husband or they defer to their wealth manager. And so it just creates like this, lack of ability to like conclude the transaction. And so that struck me as interesting. And what I've noticed in as we're coming into family office world, I think like for example, we have a pretty significant commitment from a woman family office for Fund 2. And I started to get excited because I'm like, oh wow, okay, I think maybe in this world, there could be some good alignment and good possibilities. And I often think about like, how do we solve this on a bigger scale, And I think it could come down to one day, these options being more on the platforms of companies like JP Morgan, Fidelity, right? So having the options there where it's like part of your everyday. But to the mindset of these women, it's interesting because like one of our apprentices is like, she kind of keeps in touch, tells me what she's doing, and she's doing like sports gambling, she's doing arbitraging, Bitcoin and this and that. And I'm like laughing, but I'm like, no, she's actually practicing all these incredible things. She's learning all these skills, and it's like all experimentation, And I don't know if she's going to go into venture capital or not, but she comes to our events, she meets our community, and expresses an interest, and so we're comparing her to like, there was another woman a couple of years ago who was like, I want you to teach me how to invest. Like she was, one of my friends in our community, and I was like, okay, what did you invest in? And she's like, nothing, yet. And I was like, okay, well, you can practice, you can try stuff, you have to like, it's like telling me to teach you how to swim, you got to jump in the water,
Yeah.
So I do agree with you that like, I don't know what the stats are on that or how many women are doing it or not doing it. It's just like, I'm just seeing women who are interested in it and want to learn more, and I'm like, let's go, join our community and meet others around you who are like that, and we'll just like amplify it. But I don't know what else is out there, what's not happening out there.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I love it. You mentioned your community a few times. How can people join that community? How can we create more of these types of communities, without being pigeonholed? Here's what I
Yeah.
found. Like one of the reasons why I stopped talking about women networks so much was because I was getting so pigeonholed. So before that,
Mhm.
I was getting invited to speak at conferences on AI and blockchain and all sorts of things. But all of a sudden, like all of that was starting to stop, and I was only getting asked to talk about women, and
Yeah.
and that it was becoming like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a negative way, where
Yeah.
I was like, I was actually starting to lose touch or lose contact with everything else, and it was all about this small world of small network that I could be part of. So how can people be part of these types of communities while still expanding their network as well? So maybe talk a little bit about your community. How can people be part of your community?
So I think for us, there's different entry points, right? So you can just like tell me or tell my team, just come to us, right? Step one. And then there are different things we're doing, whether it's like a dinner in LA or a large event in Nashville or New York. And I think we're a pretty small team right now, so there's only so much of that we can do. But I think what it really comes down to is when somebody comes into our community, connecting them with like people that are a fit so that they start to build their bench, and then they're kind of in for life. So like, for example, like if you're a founder, if we're investing in you, you're part of that founder community. But even if we're not, you're welcome to our events and to be our friends. And we'll try to, like, let's say, for example, you're a woman in hardware, oh gosh, we have 4 of those in our portfolio. You should talk to them. And then, so there was a woman in hardware in like the Bay Area, another one who's in Nashville now. And then we just had a little women in hardware Zoom, and 2 of them became friends, and they talk weekly. So that to me is the beautiful thing of this, if we get it right. And that can be like founder to founder. It could be, introducing a founder to venture capitalists when they're raising a round. It could be also with the young women apprentices, like, what are they interested in? They probably want to meet some of the founders, if they're interested in being a founder, maybe one day. So bringing them to a dinner or having them meet each other, and then maybe a couple of New York apprentices know each other, and then they can create their own little community. So I think for me, it's just like, if someone comes along and getting them enough good people to start with, and then it's just, they're basically out there, and they'll fly to LA, meet another person, and send us a photo of them together and be like, hey, we're hanging out, and I think that's one of my happiest moments, because it's like, they're doing it, we're not doing it, and by starting it off well, it just happens. I just had someone come in last week. She's in university, in Chicago. We did a little call. I think one call is important, just to like share each other's DNA. And then I said, hey, this is one of our other young apprentices. She's at BlackRock, and she's also from Chicago. So she's sitting in Chicago. You should talk to her, if you want to talk about Wall Street. and you're both in Chicago. You can have a coffee. And then I feel like that's it. They're going to be bonded, and then we will just continue to grow like that.
Yeah, no, I love it. Amazing. Okay, well, thank you so much, Rajiv. I really appreciate your time. I would love to have you back. We will also feature you on our Investor of the Day series, which is a new series that we are going to launch. We are excited about that. It's like 3-minute bites. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I just really hope that in the next few years, we see many more gentlemen like you, but also ladies that get into investing and start their journey. So I'd love to collaborate. Maybe we could try and help, because you mentioned all these locations. None of them are London. So maybe I can help with, maybe I can help with you creating these communities also here in London as well. And we can be your London arm and help you with that.
Yeah, no, thank you for hosting me. Thank you for all you're doing, and we want to be there for you as well. So we will stay in touch. We will support your journey however we can. And then regards London, a third of our portfolio is in London, so we're happy to do an event in London. Fantastic. It's just timing, so we'll figure something out.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Rajiv Kapoor of Chai Ventures. Be sure to follow him on LinkedIn. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube or wherever you get your audio podcast, so that you don't miss future episodes. Finally, it will mean the world to me if you leave a review and share the podcast with others who might enjoy it.